Hello everyone and welcome to Art and Design. My name is Dorgir and today we're going to learn about the basics of using Procreate. This is going to be a beginner's guide tutorial on how to use Procreate. So let's start with the gallery view. Now this is where we find all of the artworks that we have created or the artworks that basically came with the program when you installed it. To create a new artwork, we can simply tap on the plus button right in the top right corner right here and tap on screen size. This is going to create an artwork that is the size and resolution of the iPad screen. Now the first thing that I usually do when I open up a new canvas in Procreate is change the background color. And that's done by tapping on the layers menu right here and selecting background color and then just simply swiping on this disk right here. And now we can start drawing on the canvas just like that. Now if you want to increase the size of the brush that you have selected, that's this one right here. And if you want to decrease or increase the opacity, making it more transparent, that's this one right here. Undoing is very simple. You tap with 2 fingers on the canvas and that undoes. 3 fingers will redo. And if you do happen to create a number of strokes and you want to erase all of them or undo all of them, the simple way to do that is tapping with 2 fingers and holding it down, and that will undo and keep undoing until you let go. And the same works for the 3 fingers. Now, let's move back to the gallery view by tapping on this button right over here in the top left corner. And let's talk about the gallery view for just a moment. Now, here we have the artwork that we just created. And if you want to do something to the artwork, for example, sharing, duplicating, or deleting, the way to do that is by swiping to the left on the artwork, and that reveals the option to share, duplicate, or delete. If we tap on share, that reveals some other options underneath that, allowing us to specify in what format we want to share. So if you want to create a JPEG or PNG file or even something like an MP4, which is a video format, then you can do so. Tapping on Procreate image format will allow us to back up the artworks that we've created. And now let's say that you want to move an artwork from one place to another. Now the simple way to do that is by tapping and holding on it until you can pick it up like so. And there you can reposition it between any other artworks. Now this also works if you take the artwork outside Procreate, so you can pick it up inside Procreate and then drop it into, for example, the Files app. And that allows you to create a backup of the artwork very simply by dragging and dropping. And this pretty much holds true throughout the program. Most of the major functionality in Procreate is drag and drop compatible. So you can take a brush that you downloaded from the internet and you can simply drag and drop it into Procreate. And I actually have a video about how to do that, so you can check it out right over here if you're interested. But let's move on and talk about how to create folders or stacks. Now, creating a stack is a way to organize your artworks. What you do is you tap and drag the artwork on top of another artwork, and that will create a stack. And now you can see if we tap onto that stack, we can access the artworks in that stack. Now, the final thing that I want to mention right here is the plus. And we talked about that earlier. We created a screen-sized canvas, but there are other options right here. And if you tap on this icon right here, you can specify your own canvas. And you can specify the width, the height, the resolution or the DPI of the canvas, and that will show you how many layers you will be able to create if you use these settings. Now, if you change these settings, if you make the canvas bigger, that will limit the amount of layers that you can have. So if you have a super big canvas that has a very high resolution, you won't be able to use a lot of layers because basically Procreate is limited by the hardware. But the gist of it is that the larger the canvas is, the lesser the amount of layers you have. So that's something to have in mind. We have a lot of color profiles, both RGB and CMYK, available to us. Time-lapse settings allow us to sort of configure how the time-lapse replay will behave. This will basically allow us to specify the quality of the time-lapse replay. And the final one is canvas properties, which allow us to specify the background color of the canvas before we create it, or if we want the background to be hidden by default. Now the first thing that I usually do when I open up a new canvas in Procreate is change the background color. And that's done by tapping on the layers menu right here and selecting background color, and then just simply swiping on this disk right here and changing the background color. And once we're done, we can tap on done, and now we're in the layers menu. Now, most of you are probably familiar with layers, but since this is a beginner's guide tutorial, I'm going to explain a little bit what layers are. You can think about layers as pieces of paper. So each paper will represent a specific section of the image. So you can create, for example, the head of a particular character on one layer, and then you can create a new layer and position the eyes on that. And then you can create a new layer and have the mouth. That will allow you to move the mouth separately without having to sort of do some image adjustments to the artwork. So you can quickly access each individual component of the image and specify how it interacts with the layers below. So layers are a very, very powerful tool. It's probably the most powerful tool of a digital artist toolbox. So I highly recommend that you get very familiar with using the layers menu. Now, within the layers menu, you can tap on the little N over there. And when we do that, we can see sort of the properties of this layer. So we can specify the opacity of the layer, so how transparent do we want this layer to be. And we can specify how this layer is supposed to interact with the underlying layer. But let's move on and talk about the actions that you can take on a layer. Now, the first set of actions that you can take on a layer is by swiping to the left. And here you can see you can lock the layer, you can duplicate it or delete it. Now, another thing that you can do is you can tap on the layer, and that allows you to rename it, select it, copy, fill, clear, alpha lock, mask, invert, and reference. Now, all of these things are explained in my video, so I highly recommend that you go and check that out. I'm not going to dive into this in this video, but just note that you can do these actions. Now, there are also some gestures that you can do on the layers, and the one that I'm going to mention here is swiping to the right. So if you want to select multiple layers, you can swipe to the right and select them that way. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about with regards to the layers, but I'm going to move on now to the brush menu, and let's go ahead and check that out. Now, the brushes in Procreate are very, very powerful. There are a bunch of cool brushes that come with Procreate. I highly recommend that you go ahead and familiarize yourself with the brushes that are available. They have some very cool and unique properties. Now, the same gesture that I mentioned in the layers menu also works in the brushes menu. So if you swipe to the right, you can select multiple brushes so you can sort of arrange them the way that you want. You can also create a new brush set. So all of these right here are brush sets. So let's create a new brush set and name them favorites. And what we can do now is we can select brushes that we like, our favorite brushes, then simply tap and hold them, go into favorites and drop them there. And there we have access to our favorite brushes. Now we also have the option to tap on a brush in order to access the advanced brush settings. And that's basically a universe of its own, the amount of options that you can specify to configure the brush the way that you want it. And if you want to learn more about the advanced brush settings, then I highly recommend this video right here. But just note that you can configure the brushes in a lot of different ways. Now, Procreate also supports importing Photoshop brushes, so you can import Photoshop brushes directly into Procreate. Now, I made a video about that process, so you can go ahead and check that out right over here. But I'm not going to dive into more details about the brushes in this video. But one thing to mention is that the smudge tool has access to the same brushes as the brush tool. And it also holds true for the eraser tool. So the eraser tool also has access to the same brushes as the other two tools. So you can actually erase using a texture, or you can smudge using a texture. Now, smudging just allows you to sort of drag the pixels around and blend them with the neighboring pixels. And that's a really nice way to sort of get a specific texture on a painting or an artwork. Now, painting something obviously requires that we have something to paint with. And that something is color. So let's talk about color in Procreate. Now, the first thing to note is that you can detach the color picker. So you can drag on this thing right here and position the color picker where you want it. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to have it attached just so that we have the real estate to work with. And to choose a specific color, what we do is we specify the hue, which is sort of what we normally refer to as the color. And then we specify the brightness or how saturated we want the color. So if we go to the left, we have it all the way desaturated. There's no color in there. It's just the light information. Or if we want it very saturated. Now, if you want the absolute highest value, if you want the highest saturated color, then you simply tap twice on any of the corners. So tapping twice on any of of the corners will sort of snap it to that place. So that's a very nice way to sort of get the absolute highest color intensity. Now this thing right here is the color history, so you can very quickly access the colors that you have been sampling. So that's very nice. And this thing right here is your active color palette. Now you can access all of the color palettes by simply tapping on this one right here. And you can even create a new color palette. So this is just a collection of colors that you have created or that you've downloaded or that come with the program. So you can swipe to the left and share this color palette or delete it. This button right here sets it as the default. So that's the color palette that you see right here. So if I set this one as the default, now we see that this one appears in the color picking disk. Now I have a separate video about colors, so you can check that out right over here. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of this, but just note that there are various ways of picking color in Procreate. You can use a classic color picker. You can go into the color harmony, which allow you to select complementary colors. Really, really nice. This is a recent feature in Procreate 5. If you tap on this one right here, you can select how the complementary colors will be selected. If you want complementary, if you want split complementary, analog, triadic, or tetradic. That simply adds more points, and if you move them, you can see how they move as a result. And the final one is values, which basically allow you to specify exactly the hexadecimal or the RGB or the hue, saturation, brightness values of the color. So yeah, that's pretty much the colors, with exception to one thing, and that is if you want to pick a color from the canvas, what you do is simply you tap and hold anywhere on the canvas, and that will bring up the color picker. And now I've sampled this color and I can start drawing with it. Now if you think this delay is too short or too long, if you want this menu to pop up even quicker, what you can do is you can go into the settings, prefs, and then go into gesture controls. There you can see the eyedropper. There you can specify the delay of how long it'll take for this tool to appear. And you can even change the interaction itself, so we can have the action button trigger it, or even the Apple Pencil. So there's a lot of customizability, but let's move on now and talk about the transform tool. Now at a certain point you might want to move things around on the canvas. So for example, you might want to move this layer around. Now the simple way to do that is using the transform tool and basically just sort of pinching on it and picking it up. Now using one finger you can also move it around on the canvas, and you can also use the little anchor points over here in order to move the image around and manipulate it. But the purpose of the transform tool is to do exactly that. It's to transform layers. Now we have 4 modes of transformation available to us. The first one is called freeform. We also have uniform. Uniform allows us to uniformly transform the object, mostly maintaining the aspect ratio. Distort basically allows us to distort the image, sort of change the perspective of it, make it look like it's further in the distance. And the final one is warp, which basically transforms the image into a sort of a cloth. So you can sort of pick up the corners and sort of move it and just sort of play around with it like it's a piece of paper that you can fold and manipulate. Now, I'm not going to dive too much into detail about everything, but there's one function that I want to mention, that is magnetics. And that basically allows you to sort of move the image in a straight line. Now, this function also serves a different purpose. So if we rotate this image like this, 90 degrees, and tap on fit to screen, we see the image now gets fitted to the top of the screen, but there's plenty of room on the sides. But if we tap on magnetics and now tap fit to screen, it'll cover the entire canvas. So if you want to scale an image to the entire canvas, then tap on magnetics and then fit to screen. So the selection tool basically does what the name implies. It selects. So you can basically draw a boundary where you want the selection to be. When you tap on the dot right there, you make the selection. Now you can save this selection for further reference. If you want to use this selection again and again, then you can tap on that, and there you've saved the selection. Now you can also feather this selection, so making it just a little bit more fuzzy on the edges, not so harsh. And that's done with this one right here, and you can specify the feathering amount. Aside from that, you can copy paste, you can invert this selection. So if you want everything except what you selected to be selected, then you can use the invert. And if you want to remove something from the selection, what you do is you toggle this button right here, and then you draw into the selection, and that removes from the selection that you've just selected. So that's how you can remove something from a selection. Rectangle pretty much does what you would expect. It selects a rectangle. Ellipse basically does also the same, just selects an ellipse. And the automatic selection basically allows you to select based on a threshold value of the colors and the luminosity that you have on the canvas. So if I just want to select this thing right here, I can just tap on it, and while I hold the pencil down, I can push it to the right or push it to the left in order to increase the threshold, basically increasing the selection range. That allows you to sort of dial in exactly what you want to select. So that's really nice. We can just copy paste that, and there we have. This selection is now on a separate layer, so we can manipulate that in whatever ways we want. Now I also have a video about the selection tool, so go ahead and check that out right over here, or I'll also leave links to all of the videos that I mentioned in this video in the description. But now let's move on to the adjustments. Alright, so the adjustments basically specify ways of manipulating the image. So you have things like the opacity. You can change the opacity of the layer in the same way, so you can tap on the N right here and change the opacity. Gaussian blur basically blurs the image using the Gaussian effect. Motion blur blurs it so that it sort of looks like a motion. You can sort of move your finger while you are blurring in order to specify the direction of the blur. So that's really cool. Perspective blur allows you to sort of create a single point perspective and blur everything from that perspective. So that's really nice if you're looking for this specific effect. You can also change it to a directional blur, which basically blurs everything in a cone in that direction. Sharpening basically allows you to sharpen the image. Sometimes it works better than other times. I personally don't use sharpening all that much in my artworks, but it's nice that it's there. We also have noise, so we can add noise to the image. Liquefying, I have a couple of videos about this, and I really, really love this effect. Works really smooth. It basically just allows you to play around with the artwork. You can also make adjustments to an existing image, so you can increase the size of your nose or make your eyes bigger or transform the image in various ways using these settings right here, by twirling it, by pinching it or expanding it, or sort of creating this crystalline effect. The edge is also super, super useful. Really, really nice. A lot of functionality here. The clone tool allows you to specify an area of the image that you want to paint with. So instead of specifying a color, you specify, I want this area to basically appear when I draw over here. So that allows you to remove, for example, spots on your face, or simply draw in a textured area. So it's a really, really nice and versatile tool that can be used in various ways. So that's accessed by using the clone tool and then specifying where you want the sampling to be. Then you can specify the brush that you want to use, the size and the strength of the brush. Now the final ones are hue, saturation, brightness, color balance, curves, and recolor. I'm not going to dive into all of these in this video, but just note that you can change the colors of the image using these sliders right here and all of these settings. I have a separate video about adjustments, so you can check that out over here. Now the final thing to mention is the actions, and I have a separate video about that as well. But just quickly going over this, basically it allows you to insert files and photos and text. Now adding text is fairly simple. You just tap on add text, and that allows you to write in the text that you want to write. And if you want to change the style of the text, well, that's this blue button right here. Just tap on that, and there we have access to control things like the kerning, the font, and the size of the text and all that sort of stuff. Basically allowing you to customize the text as you see fit. Another very useful feature is copy and paste. Now you can also copy and paste by simply making a selection on the canvas and then swiping down with 3 fingers, and that reveals the cut, copy and paste functionality. Another very useful feature is copy canvas, and then you can just swipe down on the canvas and paste. So there you've sort of captured the canvas exactly like it is right now. So it's a very useful feature that I use a lot. Going into the canvas properties, we can crop and resize the canvas. So if you want it to be a little bit smaller or change the aspect ratio or whatever you need, and then you can sort of adjust and crop it there. Animation Assist basically allows you to do animations within Procreate. The animation tools are very powerful and there's a lot to uncover. I'm not going to do that in this video. So let's move on into the drawing guide. You can turn that on right there. And if you tap on Edit Drawing Guide, there you can see the various ways in which you can have Procreate help you draw, essentially. Now, the way the Procreate can help you draw is by giving you this grid. Now, this grid can be in the form of just a 2D grid. It can be isometric. It can be a perspective grid, which you basically draw yourself. So if you add points, you can sort of create the depth effect using the grid. Really, really nice if you want to create like three-dimensional structures. Or you can use symmetry. The symmetry, that's the one that I use most often because I just love playing around with it. So let me just show you what that does. Whenever we draw something on one side, it gets replicated on the other side. So you can create some really, really cool effects very quickly using this method. And if we go into the options right here, we can specify how the drawing guide will basically work. So if you have the vertical, if you want it to mirror horizontally, or a quadrant, or radial. And you can also turn on rotational symmetry. That basically does this sort of thing, allowing you to create spirals very, very quickly. So very powerful. Love this feature. The other options right here are flipping the canvas horizontally or vertically, seeing information about the canvas that you are working on, how many strokes have been made, how long you've been using this canvas, and yeah, that's pretty much the canvas information. Moving into the sharing, basically allowing you to share in a specific format. Moving into the video, we can access the time-lapse replay, so we can see everything that we've done so far on this canvas and play that back. Then we can export this time-lapse video as full-length video or a 30-second video. Moving into prefs, these are basically just sort of preferences. So if you prefer using a light interface, then you can turn that on. Now you can move the tools to the right using this one right there. Brush cursor, you can have that show. You can project the canvas using AirPlay. You can connect third-party Bluetooth styluses so that you don't really need to use the Apple Pencil. You can adjust the pressure curve, so how much you need to press down in order for the paint to be applied. And then you can edit the gesture controls. Now this is a world of its own and very personal. Some people like to use the finger to smudge. If they do a lot of smudging, then you can just tap on this one right here. And that means that anytime that they use their finger, that enables the smudge tool. So they can just draw using the pen, and then as soon as they touch the canvas, they start smudging the paint around. And there are a lot of settings right here. I'm just going to show you how I set things up, just so that we have this as a reference for future videos. The quick menu, I have that set to touch. So whenever I tap on the canvas, I have access to this really cool quick menu. And that basically allows you to select a specific brush, or you can specify a specific action, like adding text, alpha lock, clearing the layer, copying it, flipping it. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that you can assign to the quick menu. So depending on your workflow, I would highly recommend that you go ahead and configure this to suit you best. And we'll go into full screen right here. So 4-finger tap will activate that. Clearing the layer is scrubbing with 3 fingers back and forth. So if I go ahead and use 3 fingers and scrub back and forth like this, I clear the layer. Copy paste, that's 3-finger down swipe. We talked about that. Layer select basically allows you to select a layer by pointing at it. So if you assign this to touch or touch and hold, then you can just point to the layer that you want to select on the canvas, and that allows you to sort of just quickly go ahead and select it. And moving on to general, this is how I set that up. Moving on to the help. Now, if there's something wrong with your Procreate, if something is not working, please tap on this button right there. That will get you in contact with the customer support. Their job is to help you to get things working. The final button that I want to mention here is the advanced settings, which allow you to specify even more settings, some permission stuff and language, and some other settings right there. But yeah, that is going to do it for this video. Turned out to be a bit longer than what I expected. Procreate has added so many new features that my original Procreate tutorial, which is a few years old now, is out of date. And if you want to see more Procreate related content, go ahead and click that subscribe button. We do a lot more art and design related stuff on this channel. Hit that like button if this video helped you out. Other than that, I want to thank you all very much for watching. See you in the next one. Take care.